Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. So here's a question for you. How do you deal with an adult narcissistic child in a family system? Let's figure that out. So we don't talk enough about this. And this was actually a question someone sent in. Like I said, we don't talk about this idea of the adult narcissistic child. I mean, listen, obviously every narcissistic person out there is someone's child, right? And we often tend to focus more on parents and close relationships and intimate partners, but we miss this conversation about the adult narcissistic child, which actually can be causing a lot of strife and pain for other people in a family system or the parents. Now, that adult narcissistic child may be your sibling, your cousin, it may be your own child, but no matter what, this is a person who may be wreaking havoc within a family system. Narcissistic adult children are confusing because very often they have siblings who are not narcissistic. And that can be both reassuring and frustrating for the parents who may say, something went right and something went wrong. I did recall a consultation I had done years ago when every single adult, and there were several of them, every single adult child in this family system was narcissistic, and both parents were narcissistic. Needless to say, it was not a place where you'd ever want to spend your holidays. But that said, navigating the landscape of narcissistic adult children can be very vexing. So let's talk about the different ways that this can play out. Number one, there's the narcissistic adult child who's still being coddled and golden childed by narcissistic parents. In this case, it's a complex system with a narcissistic parent who's in cahoots with the narcissistic adult child. They may triangulate, manipulate others in the system. Siblings may find it all but impossible to break through this structure, and the adult child may either be an overgrown infant or at the very least a deeply enmeshed child within the family system, ready to guilt the others in the system for not showing up for the parents. Number two, then there is the narcissistic adult child who is simply making everyone's lives miserable, including the parents who may not be narcissistic. This may be a sibling or an adult child who expects holidays and special events to go precisely their way, who makes their wedding into the seventh circle of hell, whom the entire family has to walk on eggshells around, and that everyone heaves a collective sigh of relief when this member of the family doesn't show up. This can result in grief and guilt by a parent who may feel terrible feeling this way about their own child, and frustration and anger and perhaps some grief and guilt by siblings and other extended family who may feel this way too. Third, there may be the narcissistic adult child who has a co-occurring issue like addiction, who may result in the family facing financial issues, safety issues, or a family that is spending tremendous amount of time and resource trying to get the adult narcissistic child help. The challenge is that the narcissism may mean that this adult child is unwilling to get help or just may generally be very oppositional. This may have more of the feel of an alcoholic family system rife with structures like enablers. But the combination of the two, of addiction and narcissism, can result in exhaustion, potential danger, and financial harm to the family system. Fourth, there is the narcissistic adult child who may be financially successful and rules the family system with their money. This child may take on some financial responsibility for parents, perhaps even purchasing them a residence or taking on other stuff, and sort of imperiously judging other family members, but also setting the rules of engagement. This narcissistic adult child may have some folks in the family system in their back pocket and others who are just put off by their grandiosity and arrogance. But it can definitely fracture the entire family system with this adult narcissistic child running the show. Fifth is when we see the failure to launch narcissistic adult child. This is often a vulnerable narcissistic person who feels forever victimized, that the parents in the system sort of owe them something, and the parents may be locked into a toxic cycle of enabling the adult child who simply grouses and grumbles about a life that never went the way that they wanted. The parents may find themselves caught between resentment and guilt, and the other siblings in the family may be put off by the enabling of the parents. The bigger question, though, is what do you do? Most of these families will spend eternity walking on eggshells, having family events ruined, relieved when they don't show, stressing about holidays, and experiencing tension about everyone's different take on the situation. Obviously, the rules of radical acceptance apply here, as they do in these relationships, and the sad realization that yes, quite often this adult narcissistic child may spoil every family event. The real issue, though, is that this may be a family system where some folks actually do like each other, but are struggling with the tension wrought by this one reactive, angry, manipulative, gaslighting, and blame-shifting and victimized person. It becomes important for people in the system who do like each other to find a way to cultivate these relationships, because sometimes the fear of excluding this person, there may be a possibility that family members overall just start avoiding each other simply to avoid having to deal with this narcissistic person. That would be unfortunate. So find whatever way you can to keep those ties that matter to you. Have one-on-one get-togethers, remain in touch in other ways, but don't lose that with each other. And the other thing you can do is agree on a plan of action. If this adult narcissistic child ends up blowing up a dinner, a get-together, or a family event, you need to be prepared ahead of time that it might very well come. And how will you proceed? Will you just end the event? Step away? Try and avoid the temptation to try and appease and soothe the narcissistic adult child who's throwing their tantrum and doing everything short of upending the dinner table. And they may do that too. You've been doing this kind of appeasing for years, maybe since this person was a child. Have a plan. Maybe once they start acting up, you call the event done. You take away their supply and you take away their audience. I'm not saying they won't escalate in the face of you shutting things down. They will. But at least you aren't trying to pretend that something isn't happening. It is. And it seems that sometimes bringing it to a halt, even if it means that you give up on Thanksgiving dinner before the turkey is even carved, may mean that you get to remain sane and leftovers taste just as fine. But I can't put too fine a point on this. If you do spend each and every day trying to appease this person, then they win. You are almost better off not having the celebration on that day and finding other smaller ways separately to connect with the healthier members of the family. Many families get so caught up in wanting an event or a holiday to look a certain way that they create a monumental stress knowing that that narcissistic adult child will blow. Perhaps find and enact new traditions and a true reboot in an attempt to end these cycles. When I reflect on what I have observed with the stories I have heard about narcissistic adult children and siblings, I have been told about holiday dinners that melt down in tears and food being thrown across the room, and rage about family heirlooms in the middle of a casual get-together, or baiting during a barbecue when the narcissistic adult child tries to get a rise out of other family members, manipulation with the narcissistic sibling who uses shame and guilt to call out family members whom they believe are not carrying their so-called fair share, the drunk or high narcissistic sibling who, emboldened by their intoxicated disinhibition, uses the family get-together as a way to air their grievances. These, when we're looking at adult narcissistic children, these are ancient patterns, and you are not going to be the one to magically change them in this ecosystem. The real issue becomes how you want to navigate it. Some family members may decide to go no contact. Some may find last-minute excuses. There are no right answers, but I have seen too many families torn apart by a narcissistic adult child who turns family systems and family gatherings into bully pulpits. They can turn a group text into what feels like an experiment in psychological abuse. Find whatever way you can to maintain the healthy connections in your family and recognize that therapy may be a necessary and essential tool for you to manage the grief and guilt these kinds of choices like disengaging may raise. I hope that's helpful, and thanks again.